Fascinating history of Pope Leo XIV's family. Meet the people who shaped the first American pope. Pope Leo XIV's rise to the papacy isn't just a historic moment for the Roman Catholic Church, it's a powerful story rooted in a humble, tight-knit family from Chicago with deep American and Creole roots. Behind this groundbreaking religious leader is a remarkable family whose love, influence, and legacy shaped his spiritual journey long before the world knew him as Pope Leo XIV. From his devoted educator parents to his proud, supportive brothers, and even ties to New Orleans' rich cultural heritage, the story of Pope Leo XIV's family is as inspiring as it is uniquely American. In this article, we'll take you through the most fascinating facts about Pope Leo XIV's parents, siblings, and their shared upbringing that laid the foundation for his extraordinary path to the Vatican. 1. His humble Chicago beginnings. Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost on September 14, 1955, began his journey to the papacy in the modest, working-class suburb of Dolton, Illinois, just outside Chicago. Growing up in a three-boy household with his older brothers, Louis and John, Robert's formative years were shaped by strong family values, spiritual discipline, and a deep connection to the Catholic Church. The Prevost family was well regarded in the neighborhood, not for wealth or prominence, but for their education, humility, and devotion to faith. At the heart of his upbringing was St. Mary of the Assumption Parish, located on Chicago's South Side. This parish wasn't just a Sunday destination, it was the epicenter of their spiritual and social lives. Here, young Robert attended both church services and school, absorbing Catholic teachings that would later inform his theological studies and pastoral work. According to his brother John, Robert would often play priest as a child, not merely as pretend, but with a seriousness and reverence that made neighbors say, "He's going to be the first American pope." That playful faith was a prophetic glimpse into the man he would become. The family's modest Chicago lifestyle also shaped Robert's worldview. Dolton, a diverse and predominantly middle-class community, instilled in him the values of hard work, humility, and service. Unlike many other global leaders raised in elite circles, Pope Leo XIV's Chicago roots gave him a first-hand understanding of the struggles and hopes of ordinary families. This grounded upbringing likely contributes to his balanced and empathetic leadership style, described by his brother John as middle-of-the-road and open-minded. His mother Mildred, a librarian, and his father Louis, a school superintendent, both held education in high regard. They were committed to ensuring that their children not only excelled academically but also understood the importance of compassion, duty, and integrity. Their influence nurtured a boy who would one day be praised not just for his intellect, but for his moral clarity and pastoral heart. Even after ascending to one of the most powerful religious offices in the world, Pope Leo XIV remains deeply connected to his Chicago roots. His love for the Chicago White Sox over the Cubs is just one of many small details that tie him back to the streets where he was raised. In many ways, his election as pope is not just a personal triumph, but a reflection of the American Catholic experience, a blend of immigrant heritage, working-class values, and unwavering faith. 2. A family of educators and learners. Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost, was nurtured in a home where the love of learning wasn't just encouraged, it was a way of life. His parents, Louis Marius Prevost and Mildred Martinez, were both accomplished educators who set a powerful example of lifelong learning, intellectual curiosity, and service to others. Their academic achievements and professional dedication planted the seeds for Robert's own future as a scholar, spiritual leader, and now pope. Louis Marius Prevost, Robert's father, served as a school superintendent, a role that placed him at the helm of educational administration in their region. His commitment to academic excellence and community development went far beyond simply overseeing school policies. He was known as a mentor, a visionary, and a passionate advocate for equitable education. He believed that every child, regardless of background, deserved a quality education and an opportunity to succeed. This belief undoubtedly influenced Robert's later emphasis on justice, inclusion, and community building within the church. Mildred Martinez, his mother, was equally impressive. A librarian by profession and a quiet intellectual force in the household, she instilled in her children a deep respect for reading, research, and reflection. Mildred was known to be gentle, thoughtful, and deeply devoted to both her family and her faith. Her love of books was infectious. She maintained a home environment rich with literature, theological works, and historical texts. These surroundings fostered Robert's early love for scripture, languages, and the pursuit of knowledge. Together, Louis and Mildred were a formidable pair, not in stature or fame, but in their quiet, relentless pursuit of education as a path to enlightenment and service. In 1949, they both earned graduate degrees from DePaul University, a Catholic institution in Chicago. At a time when few couples, especially in Latino or working-class communities, achieved such academic milestones together, their accomplishments were groundbreaking. Their degrees weren't just certificates, they were symbols of resilience, ambition, and a shared vision for a better future rooted in faith and education. Growing up in this household, Robert Francis Prevost was surrounded by intellectual discussion, civic engagement, and the quiet discipline of academic work. His parents' example helped him see education not as a destination but as a continuous journey, one that involves both mind and spirit. Their belief in nurturing both character and intellect left a lasting impression on their son, who would go on to earn a doctorate in canon law and serve as an educator and theologian before ascending to the papacy. The family's multicultural background also played a role in shaping Robert's global outlook. His mother's Puerto Rican heritage and his father's French-Canadian roots gave him a cultural sensitivity and bilingual fluency that would later serve him well in ministry across Latin America and beyond. These cross-cultural influences helped him develop the inclusive, bridge-building approach that defines his leadership today. In many ways, Pope Leo XIV is not only the product of the Catholic Church but of a household built on books, integrity, and compassion. His parents didn't raise a pope, they raised a learner. And in that simple, profound act, they helped shape a man whose intellectual rigor and pastoral heart would one day guide over 1 billion Catholics around the world. 3. The deep brotherhood behind the papacy. Behind the calm, prayerful demeanor of Pope Leo XIV lies a strong foundation of family bonds, particularly the enduring brotherhood he shares with his two older siblings, Louis and John Prevost. Long before the world knew him as Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost was simply Bobby to his brothers, an imaginative, introspective child growing up in the tightly knit suburb of Dolton, Illinois. The three boys formed a trio of shared experiences, values, and inside jokes that still bring warmth and laughter into their lives today. Louis and John, now successful professionals and family men in their own right, speak with palpable pride and affection when they recount stories of their youngest brother. They often tell of how, even as a child, Robert exhibited a unique blend of spiritual curiosity and natural leadership. He was always different, not in a distant or strange way, but in a thoughtful and mature way, John recalls. We'd be outside playing, and Bobby would suddenly break into a little homily or bless us like a priest. The memory, shared with a chuckle, paints a picture of a boy already drawn to the sacred from an early age. Family photo albums reveal snapshots of these early inklings of vocation, Robert draped in a blanket pretending it was a chasuble, standing before an imaginary congregation composed of his brothers and a few stuffed animals. Louis remembers how seriously young Robert took his liturgies, even going so far as to read from their mother's Bible and give short sermons, much to the amusement and admiration of the family. But their bond wasn't just about light-hearted childhood games. As they grew older, the brothers leaned on each other through the ups and downs of life. Whether navigating academic pressures, making life decisions, or supporting each other through moments of doubt and loss, the Prevost brothers always returned to one another. Their unwavering loyalty to family and faith, learned from their parents, became an anchor in their lives. It is this same loyalty that Robert has carried into his priesthood and now into his papacy, a firm belief in the strength of relationships built on mutual respect and unconditional support. Even as Robert's spiritual journey took him far from Illinois, to Peru, Rome, and eventually the Vatican, he remained closely connected to Louis and John. Despite the demands of church leadership, he has always made time to check in with his brothers, whether through phone calls, emails, or brief visits when possible. Their conversations may now include mentions of cardinals and encyclicals, but at the core, they remain brothers first, sharing memories, family news, and encouragement. Louis and John were in the crowd at St. Peter's Square when their youngest brother was announced as the new pope. Both men were moved to tears. "It was surreal," said Louis. Not because we ever doubted him, but because it's humbling to see the little brother who once gave pretend masses in our living room now standing on the balcony of the Vatican. Their continued presence in his life is a testament to the kind of leader Pope Leo XIV strives to be, one who never forgets where he came from, one who cherishes the people who knew him before the world did. In a church that values fraternity and communion, Pope Leo XIV's real-life brotherhood serves as a living example of those ideals. The man who leads over 1 billion Catholics around the globe remains, at heart, a brother among brothers, a dynamic that grounds his humanity and enriches his ministry. 4. A childhood marked by faith and foreshadowing. In the modest suburb of Dalton, Illinois, the Prevost household brimmed with laughter, learning, and an ever-present undercurrent of deep Catholic faith. Among the 3 sons of Louis and Mildred Prevost, young Robert, now Pope Leo XIV, stood out early for his spiritual sensitivity and fascination with the rituals of the Church. From an early age, neighbors, teachers, and even relatives began to notice something uniquely devout about him, a quiet intensity that often made people pause and say, "That boy is destined for something special." While many children might play doctor or firefighter, Robert frequently chose to play priest. He would carefully set up a makeshift altar in the family's living room, using his mother's embroidered tablecloths, candles from the dining room, and whatever he could find that resembled a chalice. His older brothers, Louis and John, were his first parishioners, dutifully attending these childhood liturgies with a mixture of amusement and awe. He would read from the family Bible and deliver improvised homilies, his small voice filled with earnestness far beyond his years. According to family friends, he was known to gently correct others' behavior not out of scolding, but with a sense of moral clarity that felt deeply rooted, even precocious. This wasn't just the imagination of a child at play. Even the family's local parish, St. Mary of the Assumption, noticed Robert's early devotion. He was a regular altar server, often volunteering for the earliest masses and spending extra time in prayer after services. The priests and nuns there came to see him as unusually sincere, someone who didn't just go through the motions of faith but seemed to internalize them. One retired nun, when hearing the news of his papal election decades later, was reported to have said, "I'm not surprised. That boy had the spirit of a priest before he even knew what the word meant." It became something of a running joke in the neighborhood. "Maybe he'll be a pope one day," someone would say at a family gathering or church potluck. But the smiles were always tinged with a sense of belief, because Robert really was different. His dedication to prayer, his kindness, and his reflective nature made him stand out. Even as a boy, he carried himself with a peaceful authority that many adults respected. That early charisma was not loud or boastful, it was quiet, steady, and full of conviction. Robert's favorite childhood stories were often about saints and missionaries, not superheroes. He had a particular admiration for figures like St. Francis of Assisi and St. Augustine, and he would ask for books about them instead of toys on his birthday. During Advent and Lent, he took his spiritual practices especially seriously, fasting, reflecting, and attending every liturgical celebration he could. To his friends and classmates, he was known as the church guy, but never in a way that made him seem out of touch. Rather, he inspired others by example, living his values with such sincerity that it rubbed off on those around him. Perhaps the most touching part of Robert's early faith journey is how naturally it blossomed, not through pressure, but through love. His parents, both educators, nurtured his curiosity and spiritual hunger, always encouraging their children to follow their hearts. In Robert's case, that heart seemed from the beginning to beat in rhythm with the church. His calling wasn't sudden, it was a gradual unfolding, like the rising of a sun that had long been glowing below the horizon. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, the world sees the fulfillment of those early foreshadowings. The child who once blessed his brothers and recited prayers with reverence has become a shepherd to millions. And for those who knew him as a boy, his papacy is not just a surprise, it's a promise kept. 5. Parents who would be on cloud 9. Though they left this world in the 1990s, the presence of Louis and Mildred Prevost still lingers in the heart of Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost. Their legacy is not only etched into the memories of their sons but is also profoundly embedded in the man who now shepherds the global Catholic Church. For those who knew Louis and Mildred, their love, discipline, and devotion were nothing short of transformative, core elements in shaping the character and calling of their youngest son. Louis Marius Prévost, a school superintendent, and Mildred Martinez, a devoted librarian, were more than just educators by profession. They were lifelong learners and devout Catholics who lived out their values in both word and deed. Their home in Dalton, Illinois, was filled with books, quiet discipline, and daily acts of faith. The couple, both of whom earned graduate degrees from DePaul University in 1949, believed strongly in the power of education and spiritual formation. They passed those values down to their children not through strict instruction but through gentle modeling, consistent encouragement, and a visible commitment to faith. At the core of their parenting was a deep-seated belief that their sons, Louis, John, and Robert, should live with purpose, humility, and integrity. In particular, they encouraged a spirit of service to others, a trait that would later become a defining feature of Pope Leo XIV's pastoral and missionary work. Dinner-table conversations in the Prévost home often touched on current events, education, justice, and moral responsibility, always undergirded by the teachings of the Church. Mildred, who was Puerto Rican by heritage and spoke both English and Spanish at home, brought cultural richness and an empathetic, nurturing presence to the household. She introduced her sons to a broader understanding of the Catholic faith that extended beyond the walls of their parish, one that embraced the universality of the Church and the beauty of diverse cultures. Pope Leo XIV often credits her for his early exposure to Latin American traditions, a foundation that later supported his missionary work in Peru and Latin America. Louis Sr., a man known for his strong principles and disciplined demeanor, was equally warm and steadfast in his faith. He often read scripture with his children and took seriously his role as the spiritual leader of the family. He also instilled a strong work ethic in his sons, emphasizing that ambition should always be matched by humility and service. Their untimely passing in the 1990s meant that neither parent lived to see their youngest son become a bishop, let alone a cardinal or pope. But their influence, deeply imprinted on Robert's life, continues to bear fruit in the most visible and sacred of ways. When Pope Leo XIV celebrates Mass, speaks of mercy and justice, or extends pastoral care to the marginalized, one can sense the quiet echoes of Louis and Mildred guiding his every step. His brother John, reflecting on the monumental moment of Robert's election to the papacy, said with unmistakable emotion, they would be on cloud nine. I can just imagine Mom's tears and Dad's quiet pride. This was beyond even their dreams, but not beyond their belief. That sentiment captures the heart of their story. While they may not have imagined their son sitting on the chair of St. Peter, they laid the spiritual and intellectual foundation that made it possible. In honoring his parents, Pope Leo XIV reminds the world that the path to greatness often begins in quiet homes, through the unnoticed sacrifices and unwavering faith of loving parents. Their memory is alive in his papacy, not just in words or tributes, but in every act of love, justice, and leadership he offers the Church. 6. Strong educational and religious roots in Chicago. The story of Pope Leo XIV's early life cannot be told without acknowledging the vibrant backdrop of Chicago, a city that shaped his values, sharpened his intellect, and grounded his faith. Born and raised in the suburb of Dalton, Illinois, Robert Francis Prévost and his two older brothers, Louis and John, were immersed in a family culture that balanced academic excellence with deep Catholic devotion. It was in this environment, both intellectually rigorous and spiritually rich, that the future pope began his formative journey. From a young age, the Prévost brothers were enrolled in Catholic schools, institutions where faith and education were seamlessly intertwined. These schools didn't just teach arithmetic and grammar, they nurtured character, emphasized service, and introduced students to the deeper meanings of morality and social justice, all through the lens of Catholic teachings. The parochial education system in Chicago, with its emphasis on discipline, community engagement, and sacramental life, provided fertile ground for Robert's developing sense of purpose. Weekends were centered around Mass at St. Mary of the Assumption Parish, the family's spiritual anchor in Dalton. Parish life was not simply a Sunday obligation for the Prévosts, it was an extension of their home life. Whether it was attending catechism, participating in parish events, or volunteering with church groups, the family's presence was a mainstay in their faith community. The rhythm of liturgical seasons, the beauty of sacred rituals, and the enduring relationships formed in this parish would leave a lifelong imprint on young Robert's heart. What made these years especially formative was the intersection of culture and Catholicism in a city as diverse and dynamic as Chicago. The Prevost family's Puerto Rican roots, passed down from their mother Mildred, infused their religious identity with a unique multicultural perspective. Pope Leo XIV would later recall how his early exposure to both Anglo and Latino expressions of the Catholic faith helped him appreciate the Church's global diversity, a quality that has become a cornerstone of his leadership today. Amidst the solemnity of faith and the seriousness of academics, there was also room for fun. Like many Chicagoans, Robert grew up with a fierce loyalty to his hometown sports teams, especially the Chicago White Sox. Friends and family recall him donning his favorite cap, keeping track of player stats, and celebrating, or lamenting, games with enthusiasm. This side of him, relatable, grounded, and joyfully human, continues to endear him to those who've known him longest. Even as Pope, he's known to reference his beloved team with a twinkle in his eye, a subtle reminder that saints in the making can also be superfans. The educational and religious roots Pope Leo XIV cultivated in Chicago were not accidental, they were intentional, nurtured by family, school, and community. These roots offered more than academic knowledge or theological insight, they instilled resilience, empathy, and a steadfast commitment to justice and compassion. In many ways, the man who would one day lead the global Catholic Church is still very much the boy from Dalton, shaped by Chicago's gritty grace, unwavering faith, and strong sense of purpose. Today, as Pope Leo XIV speaks with clarity on issues of education, equity, and evangelization, he does so not just as a theologian or prelate, but as a product of the very Catholic school halls and parish pews that raised him. His story reminds us that global leadership often begins in local classrooms, neighborhood parishes, and hometown baseball fields, where faith is lived, not just learned. 7. A multicultural heritage, French, Italian, Spanish, and Creole roots. Pope Leo XIV's identity is beautifully layered, shaped by a rich tapestry of cultural heritage that span continents and centuries. Born Robert Francis Prevost, he carries within him a blend of French, Italian, Spanish, and Creole ancestry, a multicultural legacy that has profoundly influenced not just his worldview, but also his pastoral sensitivity and global approach to leadership. On his father Louis Marius Prevost's side, the roots trace back to Europe, specifically to France and Italy. The Prevost surname itself is of French origin, suggesting connections to early French settlers in North America, many of whom migrated through Quebec or Louisiana before spreading to other parts of the United States. Family stories passed down through generations speak of industrious ancestors who prized education, tradition, and service, values that are reflected in Louis's own professional path as a school superintendent. The Italian lineage brings with it a vibrant heritage of faith, family-centered living, and an appreciation for beauty and tradition, especially within the Catholic Church. These old-world influences created a home environment that was disciplined yet affectionate, intellectually rich and spiritually alive. On his mother Mildred Martinez's side, the family story becomes even more textured. Mildred was born into a proud Creole and Spanish family from the historic 7th Ward of New Orleans, a culturally iconic neighborhood renowned for its deep roots in music, art, food, and resistance. The Creole community in New Orleans, often multilingual and multiracial, has long held a distinct identity that blends African, French, Spanish, and Caribbean traditions. It is a culture where Catholicism is deeply embedded, with spiritual expressions often mixing sacred ritual with family celebration and social action. Mildred's Puerto Rican and Creole heritage brought warmth, resilience, and a strong oral tradition into the Prevost home. The stories of ancestors who endured and overcame racial discrimination, cultural erasure, and societal limitations were passed down as lessons in strength and dignity. From her, young Robert learned the importance of cultural pride, historical awareness, and inclusivity. He would later credit his mother with instilling in him not only a love for books, fitting for a librarian, but also a love for people, especially those whose voices are too often marginalized. This blend of cultural lineages gave Pope Leo XIV a unique lens through which to see the world. While many leaders may strive to relate across cultural lines, he embodies that diversity. As a result, he has always moved comfortably across borders, linguistic, ethnic, and social, connecting with people in Latin America, Europe, Africa, and beyond. He is fluent in multiple languages, not just linguistically but culturally, able to speak to the soul of communities because he understands, from lived experience, what it means to belong to more than one place. This multicultural background is not simply an interesting footnote to his biography, it is central to his papacy. It informs his emphasis on global solidarity, his sensitivity to racial and cultural justice, and his belief that the Church must be a home for all, regardless of background, status, or heritage. Whether addressing youth in Sao Paulo, elders in Rome, or migrants along the U.S. Mexico border, Pope Leo XIV speaks not just as a pontiff, but as someone whose very DNA reflects the universality of the Church. In a world increasingly fractured by difference, the story of Pope Leo XIV reminds us that unity does not require uniformity. His very life is proof that the blending of cultures can create not confusion, but clarity, a deeper understanding of our shared humanity and our divine calling to love beyond boundaries. 8. A legacy of public service and teaching. Pope Leo XIV's life of service and leadership didn't arise in a vacuum, it's a continuation of a proud family legacy deeply rooted in education, community leadership, and public service. His brother, John Prevost, a retired school principal and lifelong educator, represents a clear thread that runs through the family's history, the conviction that knowledge, compassion, and discipline are powerful tools to shape both individuals and society for the better. John spent decades shaping young minds in the Chicago area, working in both teaching and administrative roles. As a principal, he was known not only for his leadership but also for his personal investment in the well-being of his students and staff. Colleagues describe him as a man of integrity, patience, and vision, someone who believed in the transformative power of education and saw each student's success as a communal achievement. His dedication wasn't just professional. It was personal, grounded in the same values of faith, perseverance, and community that he and his brothers absorbed from their parents. This shared background in education is no coincidence. Their father, Louis Marius Prevost, was a school superintendent, a high-ranking role in public education that requires oversight of curriculum, teacher development, school policies, and student outcomes across multiple schools. His work demanded not just administrative competence, but a deep passion for accessible and equitable education. Their mother, Mildred Martinez, was a librarian, a profession that embodies the love of learning and literacy. She fostered curiosity in her children, made reading a daily practice in their home, and emphasized the importance of critical thinking from an early age. In such a household, public service wasn't a career path, it was a way of life. Dinner table conversations likely ranged from education policy to local community issues, reinforcing the idea that leadership meant responsibility, not privilege. The Prevost children learned that helping others through knowledge and guidance was among the noblest callings. These lessons were absorbed deeply by Robert, now Pope Leo XIV, who would carry the spirit of mentorship and service into the priesthood and beyond. Today, Pope Leo XIV's teaching legacy lives on, not only in his family but also in his pastoral work. Whether giving homilies, writing encyclicals, or addressing youth at global gatherings, he speaks like a teacher, clear, thoughtful, and rooted in empathy. His brother John often notes that Robert has always had the heart of an educator, someone who not only instructs, but inspires. The Prevost family's intergenerational commitment to education and leadership reveals a profound truth. Before Pope Leo XIV ever stepped onto the world stage, he was nurtured by a family that believed deeply in the quiet power of service, through classrooms, libraries, and principled living. It is this foundation that shaped a pope who now teaches the world. 9. Close ties to Pope Francis and a shared vision. Long before ascending to the papacy, Pope Leo XIV cultivated a close relationship with Pope Francis, one built on mutual respect, shared ideals, and a deep commitment to pastoral care. Their connection was not merely institutional but personal, rooted in their mutual love for the marginalized and a church that reaches outward rather than inward. As fellow members of the Augustinian and Jesuit traditions, respectively, both men prioritized humility, simplicity, and service to others over hierarchy or pomp. Leo XIV, then Bishop Robert Prevost, was frequently praised by Pope Francis for his collaborative leadership style, pastoral wisdom, and global outlook. Their bond strengthened during Prevost's time as prefect of the dicastery for bishops, a role Pope Francis appointed him to in 2023, a clear sign of trust and shared vision. In that role, he helped select and shape the leadership of the Church's global episcopacy, always emphasizing spiritual depth and compassion in future bishops. According to his brother John, Pope Leo XIV is likely to continue the trajectory set by Francis, one of progressive Catholicism grounded in mercy, inclusion, and advocacy for the poor and oppressed. He, like Francis, sees the Church not as a fortress but as a field hospital, meeting people where they are, healing wounds, and walking alongside them in their struggles. This continuity offers reassurance to Catholics around the world who found in Pope Francis a church more attuned to modern realities, and now see in Pope Leo XIV a shepherd cut from the same cloth. 10. Balanced and open-minded views on global issues. Pope Leo XIV has earned a reputation as a thoughtful, balanced leader, one who listens before he speaks and considers the complexities behind every global issue. Those who know him best describe his worldview as middle of the road, not because he lacks conviction, but because he approaches each challenge with nuance, empathy, and the intent to unify rather than divide. This approach is expected to define his papacy, especially when navigating some of the most pressing matters facing the Church and the world today. On topics like immigration, Pope Leo XIV brings both pastoral sensitivity and intellectual clarity. He understands migration not simply as a political dilemma but as a human reality that touches the core values of Catholic teaching, welcoming the stranger, caring for the vulnerable, and respecting the dignity of every person. His years of missionary service in Peru and his extensive travels have given him first-hand insight into the struggles faced by displaced and marginalized populations, and he is expected to advocate for compassionate, faith-informed solutions. Likewise, on issues such as climate change, economic inequality, and interreligious dialogue, Pope Leo XIV is anticipated to encourage engagement grounded in Catholic social teaching, without succumbing to polarization. Rather than aligning with ideological extremes, he is likely to stress discernment, listening, and the pursuit of the common good, principles that are increasingly vital in a fractured world. His leadership style is expected to be marked by continuity with the pastoral tone of Pope Francis, while bringing his own calm, reflective demeanor to the chair of Peter. He will likely challenge the Church to remain faithful to its roots while courageously stepping into the complexities of today's global landscape. Pope Leo XIV's life story. From his humble beginnings in Chicago to the heights of the Vatican, is not just a tale of personal triumph, but a reflection of enduring values, faith, family, education, and service. As he steps into his role as shepherd of 1.4 billion Catholics, the world watches with hope. His grounded upbringing, multicultural heritage, and balanced vision may well chart a steady course for the Church in a time that desperately needs wisdom, unity, and compassion.